The sun beat down relentlessly on the red earth of Burkina Faso's Tamba region, where thorny acacia trees punctuated the endless stretch of arid landscape. This was mining country, where manganese deposits, discovered decades ago, had become both a blessing and a curse. The wealth buried beneath the soil had drawn foreign corporations like moths to a flame, their operations greased by corrupt officials who treated the nation's resources as personal piggy banks. On this particular morning, however, something was different. President Ibrahim Troué, a man known for his quiet resolve, ordered his convoy to halt. Dust swirled around the armored vehicles as they stopped, hundreds of miles from the capital, in a place where the world's attention rarely lingered. There were no cameras, no reporters, no prepared speeches. Troué wasn't here as a politician. He was here as a father, driven by whispers of a horror so profound it demanded action. For weeks, intelligence reports had piled up on his desk, each one more disturbing than the last. Child labor in the mines. Systematic exploitation. Corporate executives turning blind eyes while subcontractors forced children as young as 8 into dangerous tunnels to extract minerals destined for smartphones and electric car batteries. Reports were just words on paper, easily ignored, filed away, or forgotten. But Troué couldn't forget. He needed to see it for himself. As he stepped out of his vehicle, the silence was oppressive, not the peaceful quiet of a remote location, but the heavy stillness of secrets buried deep. His security detail urged caution, wanting to sweep the area for threats, but Troué dismissed them with a wave. The only threat here was time. Every second wasted was another second children spent in darkness, their small hands bleeding as they chipped away at rock for someone else's profit. The crunch of gravel under his boots echoed as he approached the mine entrance. A sunburned man, tall and weathered, stepped forward, his face a mix of recognition and panic. "Mr. President, we weren't expecting," he began, his voice faltering under the weight of Troué's presence. The president raised a hand, cutting him off. "Take me to them," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. The man hesitated, and in that moment, Troué saw everything: guilt, fear, the frantic calculations of someone caught in the act. No words were needed. Troué's gaze, steady and unrelenting, carried the full weight of his authority and something far more dangerous, moral conviction. They descended into the mine, the air growing colder with every step. This wasn't the refreshing cool of shade but the kind of cold that seeped into the soul, the kind that marked places where human dignity went to die. The tunnel walls closed in, thick with dust and the metallic tang of mineral extraction. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows, turning the underground into a hellish maze no child should ever navigate. And then he saw them. Tiny silhouettes bent under the weight of pickaxes too heavy for their small frames. Hands that should have been holding pencils were blistered and calloused. Backs that should have been straight with youthful confidence were hunched from labor. Eyes that should have sparkled with curiosity were vacant, fixed on the dirt below, as if looking up only brought disappointment. These were children, some barely 8 or 9 years old, boys and girls who belonged in classrooms, not in this underground nightmare. Their childhoods were being sacrificed for corporate greed, their small bodies used to extract wealth they would never see. The sight hit Troué like a physical blow. He had seen poverty before, growing up in Burkina Faso, it was never far away. He had witnessed injustice in his political career. But this was different. This was children, their innocence stolen in conditions that would be deemed inhumane even for adult prisoners. One boy, no older than 10, caught his eye. A piece of blue string was tied around his wrist, a simple bracelet that seemed almost defiant in this place, a fragile reminder of innocence. When Troué stepped closer, the boy flinched, conditioned to fear adult authority. The reaction spoke volumes about what these children had come to expect. "Don't be afraid," Troué said softly, his voice gentler than it had been with the adults. The boy didn't respond but pointed to a wooden box in an alcove carved into the tunnel wall. Inside were the remnants of a stolen childhood, scraps of bread, a torn book with missing pages, and a drawing. It was a child's drawing, simple and hopeful, showing a house with smoke curling from the chimney, green trees, and a school with children playing outside. "Is this your home?" Troué asked. The boy didn't answer, but his eyes lifted slightly from the ground, a flicker of something, hope, perhaps, stirring in them. Troué knelt down, bringing himself to the child's level. In that moment, the president of Burkina Faso made himself small so a child could feel big. Witnesses would later describe this as the moment everything began to change, not just for that boy but for hundreds of children across the country. Above ground, the machinery of exploitation churned on. The foreign contractor overseeing the mine stood in the blazing sun, dressed in an expensive linen suit, fanning himself with a folder of documents. He looked annoyed at the disruption, not concerned about what the president might find. When Troué emerged from the mine, his clothes dusted with red earth and his face grim with purpose, the contractor approached with a practiced smile. "Mr. President, this is quite a surprise. If I'd known you were coming, we could have arranged a proper tour, shown you our legitimate operations, the jobs we're creating." Troué cut him off. "The children." The contractor's smile faltered, then returned as a grimace. "Ah, yes. Well, you see, they're not really my responsibility. We have subcontractors who handle certain aspects, and if there have been any irregularities, you're operating on Burkinabe soil," Troué said, his voice quiet but laced with steel. The contractor tried to recover, falling back on a well-worn defense. Of course. But these subcontractors operate independently. They were brought in by local partners. It's out of my hands. I'm just here for the technical aspects." His smirk suggested he'd used this excuse before, likely with officials who accepted bribes to look the other way. But Troué didn't respond with words. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph from a mining industry gala the previous year. It showed the contractor shaking hands with a Burkinabe general over a contract signing, both men smiling broadly, surrounded by officials and business leaders. "You remember this day?" Troué asked. The contractor's confidence vanished, replaced by panic. "I was there," Troué continued. "I remember the speeches about partnership, development, transparency, and respect for local laws." The contractor opened his mouth, but no words came. The photograph was evidence of direct engagement with government officials, proof that this wasn't a rogue subcontractor but a systemic arrangement. "I think," Troué said, "we need to have a comprehensive conversation about responsibility and what happens when international partners fail to honor their commitments to the people of Burkina Faso." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Troué made a decision that would echo far beyond the Tamba region. He didn't return to the capital to form committees or draft policies. He made a phone call. Within hours, 3 buses were rumbling along dusty roads toward the mine, followed by trucks carrying desks, books, uniforms, and materials for temporary classrooms. It was a logistical feat that typically took weeks, but moral urgency created its own efficiency. That evening, Troué returned to the mine, this time with teachers, social workers, and education officials. He went back into the tunnels himself, kneeling to speak to the children at their level. "This is your last shift," he told them, his voice firm. "Tomorrow, you go to school." The older children looked confused, the concept of education foreign after years of labor. The younger ones looked scared. Change, even positive change, was terrifying when they'd learned to expect only disappointment. Then a girl, no older than 9, raised her hand. Her voice, quiet but heavy with experience, cut through the silence. "My papa says I have to work. He says school is a lie, that education doesn't put food on the table, that people like us don't get to dream." Troué smiled, not a politician's smile but one of genuine recognition. "Your papa loves you," he said. "He wants to protect you, to make sure you survive. But surviving and living are different things. Let him come to me. I will explain it to him myself. I will show him that education isn't a luxury for other people's children. It's the right of every child in Burkina Faso." The next morning transformed everything. As the sun rose over the acacia trees, children who had spent years in darkness sat under a mango tree, wearing crisp school uniforms and holding pencils with reverence. The teacher, a volunteer who had traveled to this remote outpost, broke down in tears as she took attendance. For many, this was their first classroom, their names recorded as students, not laborers. They were no longer invisible. But the story didn't end there. In the capital, the contractor was summoned to a public tribunal, broadcast live on national television and radio. The courtroom was packed with citizens, reporters, and international observers. The contractor's lawyers spun elaborate defenses about jurisdiction, subcontractors, and plausible deniability. "We didn't know they were children," he insisted. Troué's responses were simple: "Then you are blind. We outsource to local partners. Then you are irresponsible. We were told they were of age. Then you are a liar." As the evidence mounted, the contractor's attorney whispered to him, and he tried a new tactic. "Look, Mr. President, we can settle this quietly: compensation for the families, contributions to local projects, scholarships. We're reasonable people." Troué stood, and the courtroom fell silent. "No, we settle this publicly," he said. "The people of Burkina Faso deserve to see what justice looks like. They deserve to know their children are not for sale, their resources will not be extracted through exploitation, and there are consequences for treating human beings as disposable." The courtroom erupted in applause, not polite but raw and emotional, the kind that comes from a people who had waited years for their values to be reflected in their leadership. Over the next month, the operation expanded beyond Tamba. Investigations uncovered a network of exploitation across multiple mines, implicating foreign corporations and local officials. Troué's actions sparked a national reckoning, with new laws to protect children, stricter oversight of mining operations, and international pressure on corporations to clean up their supply chains. Schools sprang up in mining communities, funded by seized assets from corrupt officials. The children, once invisible, became symbols of a new